we titled this Serotonin and Dopamine, the Happiness Tour. And I'd like to introduce you to our two main characters, which are, we're going to deviate from that a little bit through here, but we're going to start with these two guys. But what I want you to understand today is that when we talk about happiness and being happy, just like anything else in the world, in the universe today, it's really all about chemistry. It's all about molecules. And more importantly, when we talk about brain chemistry, it's about molecular structure and molecular geometry. And when we talk about that, we should be nothing but happy. So here are our two friends, dopamine and serotonin. See any similarities? All right, there's some benzene rings in there. For those of you who don't know a lot about chemistry, this thing right here is a benzene ring. Anything else? There's some hydroxyl groups on here. And finally, we've got some amine groups on here. But are they identical? No. And that's a big deal as far as the brain chemistry goes. Serotonin and dopamine are both derived from amino acids. But both of those things have to be produced in the brain, which is kind of a crazy thing. So the bottom line, what I'm saying to you is that we can't chemically, we could go into the lab and we could make dopamine for somebody who's low on dopamine, somebody who's not happy. But if we inject it into them, it's not going to do anything, because there's a blood-brain barrier that prevents the dopamine from getting up there. Our body has to produce the dopamine that we use. Okay? This is one of the causes, what they think is one of the causes of Parkinson's disease. The body stops producing dopamine and you get the onset of symptoms for that. And so this is a really big deal as far as happiness and a lot of other things. So here are our two big amino acids as far as serotonin and dopamine go. Tyrosine over here, if you could remember, but it looked, which one does that one look most like? Do you remember? This one's the dopamine, and this one is the serotonin. And here I put the two. I'm going to talk mostly about dopamine, not to pick on serotonin or let them go, but this is the big one. So take a look here. Here's the amino acid. Here's the dopamine. Similarities? What's the difference?
One less hydroxyl.
A little louder. All right, we got to drop off this ending over here. And the other thing is,
one less hydroxyl group.
We've got to take one of those hydroxyl groups off. Now, those of you who've been in organic chemistry, those of you in AP Bio even, that's not so hard to do. Some of you who've been through organic chemistry already may even be thinking, we know how to do that. So this is something that happens in your body all the time. You have to take in the amino acid to produce the dopamine. Big deal. So what we need to remember when we're talking about serotonin and dopamine is that those two structures are not identical. And you may remember the lock and key mechanism from biology. Remember that? Lock and key? Lock and key. It's got to be a certain shape in order to fit into and then things happen. Okay? People, this is all about molecular chemistry and molecular geometry. They have to have similar chemical structures. That's what this is about. It's about chemical structures. Okay? These serotonin and dopamine have receptors. The receptors are also molecules. And they have to have similar structures, similar shapes in order to fit together. If they are not the same shape, they don't fit together and nothing happens. You don't feel happy. So here's a classic diagram of the synapse and the nerves. And down here they do a really nice job. One of these are representing your serotonin receptors, and these are your dopamine receptors. And notice that they give them different shapes. Again, all they're trying to do, these things right here are proteins. These are molecules too, and when they match up shape-wise, when they have just the right geometry, they'll fit together. And if you remember back from the serotonin and dopamine structures, you see that the two structures were different, right? They were a little different, kind of the same, but a little different. Same things going on down here. So how do we keep ourselves happy? You have to take in that contain amino acids. Okay? The amino acids that we need are found to be happy are found mostly in fruits like bananas and berries, and definitely in meat. You want to increase your dopamine levels? You've got to increase some of this stuff. So when dopamine attaches to a receptor, keep in mind that the receptor is a protein. What happens? Well, they like to think of it as it acts like a spark plug. It initiates motor behavior. It associates something that happens with pleasure. It makes you a more positive person. It gives you excitement. It makes you eager to go after your goals. That's what dopamine does when it connects, when the two things are attracted to one another. Serotonin, on the other hand, gives you the feeling of well-being, a little contentment and happiness. It calms anxiety. It makes you tranquil. They like to think of serotonin as the Zen master. That picture was for you. The other thing that's important here, as we continue our tour, is that dopamine also stops or inhibits the transmission of pain signals. It stops a stress response. It also stops emotional attachment. That's a typo, I apologize. It stops emotional attachment, okay? So it's got some it does some other things too, and things start to mix together a little bit. In come these new things called endorphins. Endorphins are also neurotransmitters, just like dopamine and serotonin. They also flow through that synapse. But these guys are what they do when serotonin and dopamine are released into the synapse. That happens when endorphins attach on. They're like the valve. So if you want dopamine to go into the synapse to make you happy, you've got to have these endorphins turn on the valve. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's enough for now. So the release of the molecules dopamine and serotonin into that synapse are what finally are going to produce that happiness. Now, here's an endorphin. Bigger structure. What I want to point out is a chemical structure that we need to pay attention to. Again, some of you have recognized this. We've got a benzene ring, and then we've got 1 carbon, 2 carbons, 3 carbons, and then a nitrogen. 1 carbon, 2 carbons, 3 carbons, and then a nitrogen. Keep that in the back of your head. And notice that it occurs in multiple places here in the endorphin. So, as a chemist, what does a chemist do? Well, there's a number of options. Sometimes we like to try to figure out why things happen. Sometimes we like to fix things that are broke. Sometimes we like to think about coming up with new materials, something that makes our life easier. Or maybe it's just about making us happier. We've already established you can't do much about dopamine, right? Because
Only takes those one barrier.
got to can't pass that blood-brain barrier. So, how might we affect the dopamine?
Allow it to pass through.
What's that?
Change it so that it will pass through.
Okay, that would be great if we could do that, but so far no good. What other thing that we talked about just before could we mess with? The endorphins we just got done saying, turn the valve on. Endorphins will go through the blood-brain barrier. So if we could do something with that endorphin, then maybe we could make life a little happier. And don't feel bad if you have, I don't, endorphins, everybody, are opioids. There are lots of different opioids. There are opioids that our body produces. There are opioids that plants produce. Here is an example of a very common opioid. This is oxycodone, Oxycontin. I want you to take a look. That molecule looks awful kind of crazy, but if you take a pretty close look at it, you go in here, right here, and I'll just go ahead and do this. We've got the same thing going on. You've got a nitrogen, 1 carbon, 2 carbons, 3 carbons, and the benzene ring. This thing will behave just like a natural endorphin. You take Oxycontin, it acts as an endorphin, it releases dopamine, and it makes you have pleasure. Oxycontin is not a new substance. By the way, those of you who are science geeks, here's the official name for it. Those of you who've been in organic can take a look at that and see how much you know. Oxycontin came on the market in 1996. It was actually, that's not really true. It actually has been around since about 1916. But they came up with a new patent, a new timed release Oxycontin in 1996. And kind of a big deal. By 2001, Oxycontin became the best-selling narcotic pain reliever with over $1 billion in sales alone in 2001. They had a huge promotion, the pharmaceuticals had a huge promotion of this product. They paid for thousands of doctors to go to Florida, all expense paid, to promote this product. Here are some of its buddies. You may have heard of them. Morphine, hydromorphine, oxymorphine, dihydromorphine, codeine, hydrocodone, oxycodone, dihydrocodeine. Notice the highlighted. Just look at them. Chemically, they're all nearly identical. They do the same thing in that brain. They attach and release the dopamine. But every one of them has this thing going on inside that molecule, and this is what allows it to attach and return that valve on. Now, that was all done with good intentions, but sometimes good intentions don't always go the right way and the path changes. For me, the dark side are cookies. But for others, the dark side has a much worse result. And let's talk about that a little bit. So heroin was named by the Bayer Company way back at the turn of the 20th century. Its real name, one of its names is diacetylmorphine. Here's its structure. By now, hopefully, this is looking kind of similar for you. If not, let me help you a little bit. Oh my goodness, there it is again. What I am telling you, heroin is nothing more than Oxycontin or any of these other things. It does the same thing in the human body. It does the same thing. It's chemically alike enough that it attaches to that receptor and releases dopamine. Now, what's going on? Well, Oxycontin got too big. People abused Oxycontin. The Drug Enforcement Agency put a clamp down on Oxy. Oxycontin costs $60 to $80 a pill. Heroin costs $40 to $60 for multiple doses. You get a little balloon with all kinds, I don't know. Heroin use in the U.S. has increased 119% between 2003 and 2011. Here they are right next to one another. See a lot of difference? Same thing. For the most part, same thing. Chemically, structure-wise, same thing. Here's morphine and heroin. For those of you organic people, look at this. All we've got over here on morphine, which we got OH groups. Over here, all we've done is put acetyl groups on. We've changed it from an alcohol, organic people, to an ester. There's a fair number of you in here who could actually come up with that reaction. It's not that hard. Now people, I put some stars on there who had some issues, but I want you to understand that this issue is local. If you don't read the Daily Union, we've got some problems around here. And I want you to understand why. It didn't start on some street where somebody said, "Oh, give me some heroin." Okay? Let's talk about how addiction occurs with opioids. Most of these things allow for the release of 2 to 10 times more than the normal amount of dopamine. Think of the feeling you're going to have. You're going to be happy. Your body gets used to that. But why is that? Because these guys are really good ligands. There's like these chemicals, like heroin, are perfect matches. Better even than the ones that are in your brain. Therefore, they're going to attach faster, they're going to fit together tighter, and you're going to have a more effective, it's going to last longer. And that effect of a powerful reward motivates people to take drugs. Your body gets used to it. What's happening in the brain? Well, your brain is going to adjust by producing less dopamine. Your brain ain't dumb. All of a sudden, you're turning the valve on and all this dopamine's coming out. It's going, this isn't normal. So it's going to start shutting it down. It's not going to release as much dopamine. It may also reduce the number of receptors, the places where it will attach. So what happens? People have to take more drugs in order to get level. And if they want that really happy feeling, they have to take even more. That's the issue. That's the issue. There's a turning point. There can be a turning point. The problem with all of these things, they're very addicting, and the whole idea of going cold turkey is very challenging. The percentage rate there of success is next to nothing. So, back into the laboratory we go. There must be a solution. There are 2 of them. One of them is called methadone, the other one is called Suboxone. Methadone, here we go. Here's our chemical structure. There it is. 1, 2, 3 carbons in the benzene ring. Guess what it does?
It opens the valves.
Turns on the valve, just like all the other ones do. There it is. This one's a little more interesting, but it's still there. Suboxone is got both of them in there. It's a combination, but they both have this thing going on in there. This one's kind of interesting because it's got a T-butyl group on it. That T-butyl group sticks out here like a claw, and it actually prevents that molecule from binding on like it's supposed to, which is what makes it a partial binder and calms things down a little bit. So, methadone man and buprenorphine woman are here to save the day. Those are our 2 chemicals, but maybe not. Many people believe that methadone recovery is worse than heroin. Heroin recovery is not covered by insurance. There's a long wait list to get into a methadone clinic. And kind of the crazy part that I found is that there's been $2.2 billion invested in private methadone clinics in the last 7 years. $2.2 billion. People, this is a big industry. This is a big industry. And methadone isn't really much more than heroin, except it's legal. And they put you on it to get you off of heroin. And it's been around for a while. Suboxone, there's the issue right there. $700 a month for that medication. And insurance doesn't cover it. Now people, think about that for a minute. Think about what $700 a month, think about the people who have this issue. Young adults, starting careers. What's $700 a month going to do to your budget right now? Waiting list is a little shorter. Okay. But so this bottom line is that this one works a little better as far as this one's having better results as far as actually getting people off of heroin, off of oxy, than methadone. But the issues here are in the cost. And again, getting into one of the programs. Because you can't just go to the doctor and say, hey, I want to do this. You have to get accepted into a program. So regardless, the whole point here is that this whole idea of being happy can be a very, very rough road. If you try to do it chemically, it can be a very, very tough road to hoe. And, oh my God, yes, here's the new one. This one has been in the news in the last 2 weeks. See any similarities? Let me help you. Hey, there it is again. This is what's going on. Forbes magazine, is the super potent new opiate painkiller Zohydro just too dangerous? This thing is nasty. Chemically, that thing sucks right onto the receptor and away you go. Happy, happy, happy. Congress is involved. They're not too excited about it. If you haven't figured it out yet, this little talk today is not so much about the happiness tour, but more a little bit about the science of opiate addiction. I worry about all of you. And I hear a lot of conversations, passing and, going to the dentist and having your wisdom teeth out and getting the good stuff. Or the scary part for me is people sharing stuff like that. Or, oh, I didn't use all of them, I'm going to save them for later just in case. I hope that you understand that there is no difference between a prescription medication and heroin and all of these other things. They do the same thing. And it's very, very risky to try to do this chemically. It's very risky to do it chemically, and there's no guarantee that you're going to come back out of it. It's a tough road. Tough road. Some people think that the road to happiness is really easy. But in reality, your brain map, this is a partial brain map, and whenever you start messing with that artificially, you're going to get yourself in trouble because it affects all kinds of things. We want you all to be happy, but we also want you to be educated and make good decisions. That's what this is all about. Whew. So, don't worry.